It's the height of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union wages a brutal campaign in Afghanistan. Between 1980 and 1981, a newcomer from Saudi Arabia arrives to join the rebels trying to oust the Soviets, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden brings money and an expertise in construction, according to two men who worked alongside the future al-Qaeda leader.
He started building mountainside caves for storage of ammunition, and started building roads. And then he was very generous with money. He was popular among all Mujahideen.
When he was with us, helping the poor, widows, orphans, organizing funds for some needy peoples, we had no problem with him at all.
At the time, little about bin Laden suggests the terrorist leader he will become. During the Afghan-Soviet War, the CIA was aware of him, but had no reason to view bin Laden as a threat, says former spy Michael Scheuer.
The first time we heard about Osama bin Laden, he was involved first in refugee care in the camps in Pakistan, and then we heard that he moved into Afghanistan and began to have a unit of Arabs that he commanded. But he was on the side of the angels then. He was killing Russians, and so we didn't pay much attention to him.
Today, U.S. intelligence officers deny they had any direct contact.
ISA.
Charitable contributions from Saudi Arabia are rich enough to support not only the Mujahideen, but also the many Afghan civilians made refugees by the ongoing fighting. Over 4 million Afghans are forced to flee their homes for Pakistan.
1/3 of the population was made homeless for a very long period of time.
Here, along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, money from Saudi Arabia sets up hundreds of Islamic schools or madrasas to offer a free education for the Afghan refugee children. By the summer of 1986, the war begins to tip back in favor of the Soviet Union, despite the influx of Taliban, Arab volunteer mercenaries, and ever-increasing American arms and money. The Soviets have shifted their strategy to exploit the Afghans' biggest weakness. The Mujahideen have no effective air defense system. Unchallenged, communist gunships pummel the Mujahideen fronts and devastate Afghan refugee camps.
It was a difficult time, wounded and handicapped, orphans, widows.
The Afghans simply aren't equipped to fight the Soviet Air Force.
If we wanted the Russians to be beaten, Mujahideen had to have an air defense capability.
With the help of this top-secret American-made anti-aircraft weapon, the war is about to take a decisive turn. The Stinger is a shoulder-launched missile that uses heat sensors to lock onto low-flying aircraft. Stinger missiles have devastating accuracy, up to 11,000 feet of altitude. On September 26, 1986, the Afghans prepare to use the new weapon for the first time. The Mujahideen say a prayer, aim skyward, and fire. The Soviet aircraft plummets harmlessly toward the earth.
When the Stinger was introduced, it made all the difference. This was a turning point.
After we received the Stinger, we were able to master in big numbers. So I will bring Mujahideens from different provinces together, make a very mighty force out of them.
Soviet pilots learned to fear the Stinger so much that they often refused to fly low enough to hit their targets. For the first time since the war began, a Mujahideen victory actually seems possible. Soviet Prime Minister Mikhail Gorbachev faces a painful choice.
What the stinger did is to force Gorbachev and the Politburo to a decision point. They decided they had bled enough.
3 years later, the world watches the final chapter in one of history's biggest upsets. On February 15, 1989, the Soviet Union completes a full retreat from Afghanistan. After 10 years, billions of dollars in arms and support from the US, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, and 1.5 million Afghan lives, the war is over.
Afghan was very happy to celebrate the withdrawal of the Soviet Union. Men and women was thinking that now we will be having very good Afghanistan.
Foreign volunteers like Osama bin Laden returned to their home countries as Islamic war heroes.
Afghanistan has tremendous resonance throughout the Islamic world as a victory of Islam over the West, Islam over the godless Soviets, and it was really a history-making event.
In the United States, longtime CIA officers like Milt Bearden and Michael Scheuer celebrate one of the greatest accomplishments of their professional lives.
It was probably the most successful covert action program in the history of the United States government.
The Soviet Union would never recover from the losses it sustained in Afghanistan. Communism itself would soon collapse in Russia and all over the globe.
The beneficiaries of the Afghan war were actually going to be 300 million people in East Central Europe and ultimately in the old Soviet Union.
In the end, the Afghans' great sacrifices seem to benefit everyone but Afghans themselves. Many are left poor, homeless, or orphaned. Wounded men like Mullah Muhammad Omar return to their villages, only hoping to live out the rest of their lives in peace. But the violence doesn't end with the Soviet withdrawal. The end of one war in Afghanistan will only be the beginning of another. Will lead to the violent rise of the Taliban. The Taliban movement has simple aims: to restore peace, disarm the population, and implement strict Islamic law. Omar's followers wear long beards, dark eyeliner, and distinctive black turbans to signify their religious commitment. On November 3, 1994, this growing Taliban force moves on Kandahar. After just 2 days of fighting, Mullah Omar's followers capture the second largest city in Afghanistan, and at a cost of only a dozen men.
They rise up at that moment and take over.
They captured Kandahar almost without a fight.
How did Omar's relatively unknown force capture an entire city without a major battle? Rumors circulate that the Pakistani Intelligence Service, or ISI, has bribed the local commander in Kandahar to surrender. After Pakistani Interior Minister Nazirullah Babar calls the Taliban "our boys," suspicion grows that Omar's troops are backed by Pakistan. But two former ISI leaders deny the charges.
The Interior Minister started saying these are my boys and all that, but the reality is, no, not at all.
It's wrong to say that Pakistan created Taliban. Absolutely not. The Taliban is a phenomenon by itself, you can say peculiar to Afghan society.
Other observers say that even if the ISI didn't create the Taliban, Pakistan was instrumental in Omar's rise.
And I don't think Pakistan had a role in trying to raise the Taliban army initially. When Pakistan came to realize that Taliban are a growing force, they offered them food and fuel and supplies.
The ISI helps Mullah Omar's troops repair huge stockpiles of sophisticated Soviet weaponry left behind in the haste of the Red Army's retreat. In Kandahar, the Taliban captured dozens of tanks, stores of weapons, helicopters, and MiG fighter jets. Omar's heavily armed troops now look to conquer more territory. In the next 3 months, the Taliban Islamic militants, including the budding terrorist leader Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden and Omar have become fast friends during bin Laden's exile in Afghanistan.
One of the things I discovered when I went there was the extent to which the Taliban and bin Laden had more or less merged.
With Mullah Omar's blessing, bin Laden opened several terrorist training camps around the Kandahar area.
What bin Laden did for the Taliban
Afghanistan was destroyed by the Russians, and if the other half is destroyed by Osama, I'm ready for it.
Omar tells the Taliban to ready for jihad, holy war against America. October 7, 2001, the United States launches Operation Enduring Freedom, a military campaign to depose the Taliban regime, destroy al-Qaeda, and capture or kill Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden.
What the United States did was capitalize on internal opposition to the extremists of the Taliban by sending small groups of special forces into the country to help organize these opposition groups.
Elite American commandos and unchallenged U.S. air power now support Massoud's army. The Northern Alliance moves swiftly through the countryside, hunting down Taliban and al-Qaeda positions, and summoning death from above. Mazar-e-Sharif is the first city to fall. Afterwards, U.S. troops and the Northern Alliance liberate the cities of Herat and Kabul in quick succession. Less than a month later, U.S. forces overtake Kandahar, Mullah Omar's headquarters, and the final Taliban holdout.
They came to my house and they captured me for 1 year and 10 months. I was in the detention of America until I was released from Guantanamo.
American troops take Taliban and al-Qaeda prisoners by the truckload and ship them off to an uncertain future as enemy combatants. But Osama bin Laden manages to escape. Mullah Omar also eludes U.S. forces, despite a $10 million bounty on his head. With Kandahar under siege, the Taliban leader manages a transmission to his The Taliban movement seems here to stay. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's living standards still rank among the worst in the world. 24 million people depend on foreign aid. Opium farmers prop up the barely existent Afghan economy. The Taliban miraculously eradicated opium poppy cultivation in 2000. But in 2006, Afghanistan accounts for 92% of the world's illegal heroin. Afghan children play amongst the rubble accumulated over 3 decades of fighting. Their average life expectancy is just 43 years.
I couldn't in any way, shape, or form predict how long it's going to take to rebuild a nation that has suffered through 25 to 30 years of conflict. I can tell you that it's a long time.
An entire generation of Afghans may never live to see peace.